everyone, welcome to the review segment of the Three Quarters podcast, your official podcast for the 2018 Rugby Africa Gold Cup. Also remember to jump onto the hashtag Road to Japan to support your team as they look to qualify for the Rugby World Cup in 2019 in Japan. I'm Denima Duffield.
And I'm Ngaro Kamuya.
So it's become apparent after numerous discussions on the show that, you know, Springboks aside, rugby in Africa has just been going backwards.
Yeah.
And I mean, the conversation will revolve around the fact that, or rather the problems facing unions, you know, throughout Africa.
Yeah.
And why we're being unable to realize our full potential,
Yeah.
you know, in rugby, of course. And I mean, one thing, I'll just, you know, throw a few things at you. Corruption, inconsistencies
Yes.
in terms of sponsors, coaches,
Yeah.
lack of funds. I mean, those are things that come into play. Definitely, they hamper the game.
Yeah.
And I just want to know your opinion on it.
I'd like to go through this topic like country by country and just look at exactly what's happening in each and every union, and we'll focus really on the top tier countries and see what's happening in Africa. But first, I want to start by saying that I don't think that statement is accurate, because yes, we do understand and we appreciate the fact that Springboks are eons ahead of the rest of Africa in terms of rugby. But I don't think it's an accurate statement, because when you say that rugby has gone backwards, yet we've increased from 6 unions to 38 unions across the continent, yet rugby is the fastest growing sport on the continent. And you know, it doesn't marry, it doesn't add up, and it doesn't make sense. So I'd like to start by, yes, I do understand where that statement would be coming from. But I would disagree with that statement in terms of, yes, I don't think that rugby is going backwards. So to go into the topic, I mean, the first country, of course, I'm going to talk about is Namibia. And Namibia, to be honest, they have no competition, or they have close to no competition on the continent. And I think it's primarily because of the other unions as opposed to them being very good.
That's with the exception of South Africa.
With the exception of South Africa, yes. I mean, because of the relationship with South Africa, the game has been growing in leaps and bounds in Namibia ever since independence. I think they got their independence in 91. I can't remember my history too well, but in the early 90s. So they have represented Africa at the Rugby World Cup ever since 1999. So their relationship with South Africa, in my opinion, helps them a lot, because like we've said, South Africa is the foremost country in terms of rugby on the continent, and therefore the relationship between Namibia and South Africa really helps Namibia's game. Their game really improves. So you have to give kudos to the Namibian Union, because in all honesty, if they're not doing what they needed to do, then I don't think Namibia would be at the level they are.
Of course.
The only problem for me comes in when they get to the Rugby World Cup. Then we then discover, okay, fine, Namibia are very good in Africa, but then when they get to the world stage, okay,
there's this huge gap.
There's a huge gap, you know. So that's what I would think Namibia would be working on, you know, if they do make it to the 2019 Rugby World Cup in Japan. I think about the 2015 World Cup in England, and though they lost, I remember it was a very commendable performance. And yes, it was a second string squad when they played against the All Blacks in the group stages, but it was very commendable. I mean, 56-13 to the All Blacks. 10 years ago, you were losing 140 something. You know, I think in 2003 they lost 142-0 to Australia. So, they're doing something right, but to be the foremost in Africa. But I think they need to do a bit more to be able to be competitive with the rest of the world. And I think they have the resources. I think they are linked to South Africa. I think the rugby community in Windhoek and in Namibia at large is good enough to make them get to that level. The next country I'm going to talk about is Kenya. Lots of potential, but the union politics in Kenya is what always messes up Kenya rugby. Misappropriation of funds, corruption, everything that's bad to think about, to talk about in terms of management. That's what happens in Kenya. I remember reading an article a while back that said that in the year 2010, I think, 2010 or 2011, the union got 320 million shillings in sponsorship. That's about, what, $3.2 million in sponsorship. And somehow you could not account for that money, where it went to. So that's the biggest problem with Kenya. They have loads of potential. They have a very enthusiastic and passionate rugby community. They have a very, by African standards, they have a very solid league. They have a very large base pool, if you ask me, pool of players.
Yeah.
It's typically not a rugby playing country, but it has a very large pool of rugby players.
Yep.
And the game is really growing in Kenya. It's a growing sport. It's really growing at a tremendous rate in Kenya. The popularity. You think about 5-6 years ago, if you went for a Kenya international game, you'd be about 2,000 people watching the game. And now, whenever Kenya is playing at home, it's 6,000 people, 7,000 people who have gone to watch the game. So yes, everything is there apart from management in Kenya, and I think that's what affects Kenya rugby the most. For example, I think about in 2014, when perhaps you could say they had a very close to what you would imagine in terms of management of the union. They went for the Vodacom Cup. They were there for about 6-7 weeks, and we saw the results. I mean, they played Namibia, they beat Namibia. Then, in the same breath, again mismanagement, and they go on to lose to a very subpar Zimbabwe team, and that's how they miss out on the World Cup qualification. So Kenya is nothing to do with the potential, it's nothing to do with the skill set, it's nothing to do with the pool.
It's more to do with the management.
It's more to do with the management. I think that's what the problem in Kenya is. When we go to Zimbabwe, while in Kenya it's union politics, in Zimbabwe what has affected them most is country politics. That is what has affected them over the years, up until last year, of course, with the change of leadership and Emerson Mnangagwa coming in as a president. So in the years that Robert Mugabe was president in Zimbabwe, you had very many class Zimbabwe players leaving the country to go play abroad. You have very many guys going to play abroad and not wanting to represent Zimbabwe or come back to Zimbabwe. I go on to add two people we've mentioned before on the show. Tendai Mtawarira, who plays for the Springboks, is actually from Zimbabwe. David Pocock, I think, to me, the best back row in the world as we speak, in terms of breakdown dominance. He's actually from Zimbabwe, but he plays for Australia now. And there are very many other people who've come from Zimbabwe. I think about, they have the second row, Fortunate Chipenda's partner, somebody Standa. Standa's brother, CJ Standa, actually plays for Ireland, right? So, yes, they have the talent, but I think the country's politics has really affected the game. And you only hope that with the change in leadership that happened last year, and then Zimbabwe can be able to realize the potential that they have, and they can be able to tap into the potential that they have. I've seen a very solid plan that they have, and that's why my feeling is that Zimbabwe are not really looking towards now. They are already planning for 4 or 5 years later. Peter de Villiers is there. They already have a select school squads that goes for Craven Week in South Africa. So yes, they have already started it. We'll not feel the results right now, but Zimbabwe have already started years to come and recapturing the glory that they had. I mean, Zim has been to the Rugby World Cup. 87 or 91, one of those two. So yeah, I think that Zimbabwe's problem was primarily the country's politics, but I think that has changed, and my money is on Zim. Like in the next few, if there's somebody you can challenge. I mean, yes, of course, Kenya are the obvious contenders, but you cannot predict Kenya's political situation in terms of the union. So Zim, to me, are the guys who I think are going to be rivalry, yes, Namibia in years to come. When you go to the North Africans, it's a case of money, I think, and also the situation in lack of funds, and many of their players go to France and they decide that they don't want to come back. And when they do, you can see that the impact they have on their teams. So yeah, Morocco and Tunisia to me largely is because of lack of funds and the situations in their country. That's why the players don't feel obliged to go back to those countries.
Actually, on that point, I remember reading up on a lot of countries in Kenya that play, in Africa that play rugby. When you don't have your funds set up properly, what happens is your better players go play abroad, which is something you've just mentioned, and that's something that obviously needs to be sorted out within the unions. When it comes to things like getting to rugby, for the younger players, of course we've got a lot more people, younger people playing rugby, which is very good. I mean, we can't say that rugby is going backwards in that regard, because we've got a lot more kids playing, getting into the game. We've got exhibition matches, before games. Actually, before international games, you would even have a whole tournament, going on just before the main match, which is very good. I mean, very commendable for the various countries that are doing it. And of course, that's going to be your feeder system. And yes, in years to come, I think that we will begin to feel this impact on the game. We're not feeling it maybe right now, but we will begin to feel it. Now we've just got to sort out our unions.
Yes.
Because that's the one thing that no matter how much potential you've got, it will always hamper the game in some way.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with you. That Africa's problem, and it's to a large extent, I mean, not even in rugby, in every sport, and largely in government even. Africa's problem is not potential, it's not the lack of potential, it's more to do with the management.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that's my 2 cents. Yeah.
Yes, so in regards to the statement, Springboks aside, rugby in Africa has gone backwards. We do agree to some extent, but there are exceptions to the rule.
There are exceptions to the rule, number 1, and number 2, I mean, it's not only Springboks who play rugby in Africa, that's what we've said. 15 years ago, we had 6 unions. We now have 38 unions across the continent in 53, 54 countries. Fastest growing sport on the continent. And I don't think there are myriads of issues, there are problems, but I don't think that it's going backwards.
No, I definitely think, yes, snail pace, but it is moving forward a day at a time.
Yes, a day at a time.
Yep. So we commend everyone who's doing work on this. That is Rugby Africa and all the various unions.
Yes.
I mean, we can't go without mentioning them, obviously, because they're doing a lot of work. It's not one of those things you wake up and happens in one day. It's a whole process.
Yes.
And it's good that they've started it.
That's very true.
But yeah, we'd like to know what everyone else thinks. If they think Africa in general, rugby is going backwards. And if it's only South Africa that have a commendable team, what do you think? Tell us. Anyway, find us on social media. That is by following us on Instagram, liking our page on Facebook, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. I'm Demi Duffield.
And I'm Nara Kamuya.
See you on Friday for the preview.